Hi class, Mrs. Plank here for your Remember When moment of the day. Remember when we learned that fractions and decimals are just different ways to represent the same value? In order to change a fraction into a decimal, we first need to change the denominator to a base 10 value. That is a 1, a 10, a 100, a 1,000, a 10,000, and so on. Then our numerator value will be the value that will appear after the decimal place in our decimal value. To change 9/10 into a decimal, the denominator is already a base 10 value. So all we have to do is write 9/10 when 9 is in the 10ths place. So I place my decimal. Here's my 10ths place. So I place a 9 in the 10ths place. So this is 9/10 as a fraction. This is 9/10 as a decimal. And traditionally, we place a 0 in front of the decimal place to show our ones place. Now what happens when we have a denominator of a number that is not a base 10? Well, in the case of 25, we can multiply 25 by 4 to make this fraction have a base 10 denominator. In this case, we're looking to make it a base 10 denominator of 100. In order to make 25 100, we multiply 25 by 4. And of course, we've learned that any time we change a denominator by multiplication or division, we must also change the numerator. So since we multiplied 25 times 4, we multiply 12 times 4. It should also be noted that 4 over 4 is also a fraction that equals 1. So we are essentially multiplying 12 25ths times a fraction equivalent to 1. So we're not changing the value of 12 over 25. Now we know from multiplication of fractions lesson that we multiply our numerators and record our answer, and we multiply our denominators and record our answer. So 12 times 4 you will find is 48. And 25 times 4 you will find is 100. Now we have the fraction 48 100ths. To write that as a decimal, we place a decimal point. We write our numerator 48 after the decimal place into the tenths and then the 100ths place. And we place our traditional 0 to fill the ones place. Now 48 100ths is equivalent to a decimal of 48 100ths. Also, it could be said that 12 25ths is equivalent to the decimal 48 100ths. And that is our Remember When lesson of the day. In our Remember When, we reviewed how we have learned that fractions and decimals are just different representations of the same number. Then we discussed how we can change any fraction to a decimal by making the denominator a base 10 value, and then simply placing a decimal point with the numerator's value, and it makes a decimal. Today we're going to talk about what to do if my denominator is not a factor of a base 10 number. I have no idea what to do. Well, yes, I do. All you have to do is something that you've known how to do for years. Since fractions are just representations of division, then all we have to do to get our answer as a decimal is divide. Let's talk to math antics to get a little bit better view of what that might look like.
Let's take the fraction 1/2 and convert it into a regular division problem with this division symbol. Now all we have to do is follow the procedure for division. We just see how many times this 2 divides into this 1. Uh-oh, it won't divide any times. 2 is bigger than 1. Looks like we're going to need some help. And that's where the decimal point comes in. Now you remember that in the last section, we learned that 1 could be written as 1.0 or 1.00 or 1.000, and its value is still 1. Let's try doing that here and see what happens. After the 1, put a decimal point and then a 0 in the tenths place. Now our division problem looks like 10 divided by 2, and that's easy to do. The only difference is we have a decimal point. Let's ignore the decimal point for a minute and pretend that our problem really is 10 divided by 2. So 2 will go into 10 5 times, because 5 times 2 equals 10. And that leaves no remainder. So we're done, right? Not so fast. We've got that decimal point to deal with. And we know that 5 can't be the answer because 5 is bigger than 1/2. We just need to include the decimal point in our answer for it to be correct. We put it directly above the decimal point in our problem. There. Now our answer is 0.5, or 0.5, which is the more proper way to write it. So by dividing, we figured out that the decimal value of 1/2 is 0.5. Now let's try converting the fraction 3/4 by dividing. Of course, we start by rewriting our fraction like this, 3 divided by 4. And again, we run into the same problem. 4 is too big to go into 3, so it looks like we're going to need a decimal point here too. Let's put a decimal point after the 3 and a 0 in the tenths place to make 3.0. Now our problem almost looks like 30 divided by 4. Now if you remember your multiplication table, you'll know that 4 goes into 30 7 times, because 7 times 4 is 28. 30 minus 28 leaves a remainder of 2, but we don't want a remainder, so let's keep going. 4 is too big to divide into 2, so the only way we can get rid of the remainder is to use another 0 in the hundredths place, which makes the number we're dividing up kind of look like 300. Now we can bring down that extra 0 to make the remainder look like 20. And 4 will go into 20 5 times, because 5 times 4 equals 20, and that leaves no remainder. Oh yeah. But don't forget, we need to include the decimal point in our answer. Now if you've kept your columns lined up like I have, you'll see that the decimal point goes right here, and that makes our answer 0.75. So the decimal value of 3/4 is 0.75. All right, let's convert one more the hard way. Let's find the decimal value of 1/3 by dividing 1 by 3. Again, 3 is too big to divide into 1, so we'll need to use a decimal point and another 0, which makes our problem look like 10 divided by 3. That's easy. 3 goes into 10 3 times, because 3 times 3 equals 9, and that leaves a remainder of 1. Just like before, we don't want a remainder, so let's use another 0 so we can keep on dividing. And that gives us 10 divided by 3 again. Well, we know that 3 goes into 10 3 times and leaves a remainder of 1. Still a remainder of 1. Well, it looks like we're going to need another 0. But that's just going to give us 10 divided by 3 again, which is going to give us another remainder of 1. This looks like it might keep on going forever. Some fractions are like that. If you divide them, you'll see a repeating pattern of numbers that continues on forever. So the decimal value of 1/3 is 0.33333333, and 3's that keep on going forever. But since we can't keep writing 3's forever, we can just stop and round the number off. Or we can use this special symbol that means this number repeats forever. Alright, so all we have to do to convert a fraction into a decimal is divide. And so far, we've been doing that the hard way. But now, we're going to do it the easy way. We're going to use a calculator. Let's try a couple with a calculator and see what we get. To convert 1/4, we just punch in 1 divided by 4, and we get 0.25. To convert 2/3, we just punch in 2 divided by 3, and we get 0. A whole lot of 6's. Looks like we have another one of those repeating decimals. Yep, this way's certainly easier, and quicker too, but it's important to know how to do it both ways. The 5 fractions that we've just converted are so common that it's a good idea to memorize their decimal values. Here they are again so you can review them. 1/4 equals 0.25. 1/3 equals 0.33333. 1/2 equals 0.5. 2/3 equals 0.66666. And 3/4 equals 0.75. So that's how you convert any fraction into a decimal. You just divide. And we already learned how to go the other way, to convert a decimal into a fraction, in the last section. So be sure to review it if you need to. In the next section, we're going to learn a few tricks that we can use to help us compare the values of fractions. But before that, a quick review. To convert any fraction to a decimal number, all you have to do is divide the top number by the bottom number. Usually when you divide a fraction, you'll need to do decimal division. By using the decimal point, you can keep writing zeros in the decimal number places and continue dividing until you have no remainder. Sometimes decimal division results in a pattern that keeps repeating forever. When that happens, you can draw a line over the repeating digits instead of writing them forever. Once you know how to do decimal division, I recommend that you convert fractions using a calculator since it's quicker and easier. And as always, be sure to do the exercises. And don't forget to practice dividing the hard way too, because if you're ever stranded on a deserted island without a calculator, you need to be able to do your math homework.
Math antics is always so helpful. Now, let's get back to some harder problems. We've already learned how to change a fraction to a decimal with division. But what if our fraction has a larger denominator? In the case of 1/16, if we're going to do this using our human calculators, we need to use division to do so. So we take our numerator and put it underneath the division bar. 16 on the outside. We know 16 will not go into 1, so we add a decimal and a 0. But what now? Will 16 go into 10? No. Can we do anything about it? Yes. We still bring our decimal up in the same position that it would be in the answer. This is still 1.000, isn't it still just 1? So we can add as many zeros as we need to. 16 will not go into 10, so we need to bring up a 0 placeholder. And I like to think of this 0 as the, oops, it won't go in there. So we put a 0 in to say no. Then we look at 16 into 100. Will 16 divide into 100? Sure. How many times will it go in? Well, if you don't know your multiplication tables with 16, you can go off to the side and do some multiplication by hand. Trial and error works great. Start with a guess of, let's say, 5. 6 times 5 is 30. 5 times 1 is 5, with 3 that we regrouped, and that makes 8. 80. I think I can fit another 16 in there. So let's try 16 times 6. We'll have 6 16s instead of 5 16s. 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times 1 is 6, with 3 regrouped is 9. 96. Well, I think that's about as close as we're going to get to 100 without going over. So let's use 6. 16 times 6 is 96. I line up my 100 with my correct place values. 100 minus 96 is 4. You can think of this as a big group of 100 and take away 96 and the difference is 4. If you can't think on that large of a scale yet, that's okay. You can still do it the long subtraction way by regrouping. We change this to a 10 and this to a 9. And then we change this to a 0. So 10 minus 6 is 4. 9 minus 9 is 0. And 0 minus 0 is 0. So we have a 4. We bring down our 0. And now we're looking at 16 into 40. How many times will it fit? It looks to me maybe like 2. But I'm going to go off to my work area over here again and try it out. 6 times 2 is 12. Regroup my 1. 2 times 1 is 2. With the regrouped 1, we get 3. 32. I think that's as close we're going to get to 40 without going over. So I will put a 2 up here into my quotient. 16 times 2 is 32. And I subtract 40 minus 32. And I know that that's 8. But I can regroup if I need to. I still have a remainder, so I'm going to add another 0 and bring it down. Notice I don't have a repeating decimal this time, so I need to keep going. Now, I need to see how many times 16 will fit into 80. And if I look up here to my work from before, since I wrote it down and didn't do it in my head or on the calculator, I can now see that I already found the answer was 8 to 80 is 16 times 5. So 80 divided by 16 is 5. So I'll record that into the quotient. 16 times 5 is 80. And now I have no remainder, so I am finished. So the answer to 1/16 as a decimal is 0.0625. And that is how we take care of larger denominator fractions. All right, now at this time you need to take your quiz to see how you remember the concepts from this lesson. It is open note. You may see a couple problems on your quiz from the notes. You will probably see a couple that are for you to do on your own. Please no calculators this time. I want to see how your human calculator works today. So go ahead and take your quiz. You have 5 minutes and the timer starts